this video, we're going to expand on what we just recently learned about creating our own project and getting that started. And at the very end of that, we started looking at how we can get models outside of the Unreal Engine and how can we put that in another program like Maya. So we're going to do a much deeper dive on that. We will go ahead and take a mannequin. We'll export a mannequin out from the Unreal Engine 5. We'll also take a few different pieces from our scene and get a template of the layout of our scene. We'll export that out so we can pull that into Maya as well. Then we'll go into Maya. We'll go ahead and import both those things into Maya, and we'll get a scale established for our scene inside of Maya. That will give us confidence to know that anything that we build inside of Maya will be the right scale for our project. And then when we export things out from Maya, we can import those back into the Unreal Engine. So we will have a pipeline established to where we can move things back and forth between the two different programs and have confidence that our work will line up in both areas, and we can work together with these two programs and have no big surprises. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, there's basically two ways to export things out of the program. So if we go in the content browser, and from the previous video we already took a look at how we can navigate and find things within here. So I'm going to use the skeletal mesh Mani, and I'm going to use not the simple version but the other version. So we can right click on this and we can go and say asset actions, and we can export. So we can export skeletal meshes, we could export textures, we could export model data outside of the program, and so we have access to that in a different program, right? So that's one way that we can do that. Let's just go ahead and do this mannequin. Let's export it this way. We'll say export. Find yourself a location where you want to export this out. So I'm just going to put this on the desktop real quick, and I'll just call this temp UE5 like this. So it's up to you to choose your location where you want. I'll just leave the name exactly what it is, the SKM for skeletal mesh Mani, and I'll go ahead and save that just like that and say export. We might as well do a mesh as well too. So I'm going to go to the level prototyping area and go to meshes, and we have this static mesh chamfer cube. So let's just right click on that and do the same option for that. We'll go to asset actions and say export, and you can see the file type is set to FBX. I guess there's some other file formats that you could change that to if you wanted to, but I do want an FBX. So I'll leave that. So this is just a static mesh, and export that out like this. I'm not really too concerned with the options for this. Now you could tell it we don't want collision. I'll show you how to deal with that inside of Maya. It's not a big deal. But if you didn't want to export collision, you could turn that off. So I'll just go ahead and hit export for that. Okay, so that's getting individual items exported out from the content browser area. Now let's say we needed to get a representation of what our scene looked like, and we needed to get that into something like Maya. So we can select objects, we can hold down control and add selection to those things. We can add the floor like this. So it's possible that you could select it in the world. You could also select these things in the content browser like this. So I'm just trying to go find all the different meshes that would be within through here. And so we've got some more, there's some cylinders, some more here, some cubes, and let's see what else we've got. So I don't have to get the entire thing, but I might as well just select them. So again, it's holding down control and getting those. Now if I want to export this out from the scene, let's see, I don't know if we've got, no, we don't have it under edit here. Looks like we will have to go up to this area. So I was just trying to see if we could right click and maybe get to that a little bit easier. But we will have to go to File, Export Selected. And when we do that, it gives us a dialog box for this. We can go back to where we're at. I got this temp UE5, and it's already going to give it a name based off of what the map is. So you could add an underscore 1 or whatever you want to do to that. But we're going to go ahead and save that out as an FBX. Again, if you don't want collision, I'm going to turn collision off for this because we've got a bunch of different objects and everything else like that. And I'll show you on the cube what it looks like with the collision. So let's go ahead and hit export for that. Okay, so that's going to be all we need to do to export our pieces out. Let's just go ahead and load up our program, such as Maya, and we'll go and take a look at importing those into Maya. Okay, here we are inside of Maya, and yours might look like it's this in the quad view, or may be this single panel in a perspective view like this. So you might be going, like I said, back and forth between these two like this. And you can hit the space bar and you can go out of here, and if you wanted to look at a different view, you could always just tap the space bar over here and you get to a different view that way, like that. Okay, so this may work for you if you've got things set up, may not, I don't know. I'm going to take my Windows Explorer window and I'm going to take this cube and I'm just going to click and drag it into the viewport like that, and it should invoke the FBX importer options for that. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit import like this for the cube. And this is what I was telling you, where you're going to have these two different objects. You've got the mesh that we have, and then you have this thing that says UCX. That's for the Unreal Collision model that you have here. We don't really need that, so we can go ahead and get rid of that like that. Okay, so here's the cube in. So that's one way to pull it in. If that doesn't work for you, you may have to go to Windows, Setting Preferences, and go to Plugins Manager and type in FBX. And you would want to make sure that FBX Maya.mll is loaded and make sure that's set to auto load. You could also have this loaded for, they've got a game FBX exporter as well. So just make sure that that's loaded. Okay, so that's one thing to do for that. I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to take you through the other way. So we can go to File, and we can go to Import, and we can do Option Box like this. And you could say, and you can specify file type, and make sure that's set to FBX. Go ahead and say Import. And in that case, you're going to have to navigate to where that folder structure sits that you have. And this time I'm going to do the skeletal mesh SKM Mani. I'll go ahead and do that and open that up, and I'll tell it to import, and it should import in our mannequin that we have. Okay, now this is going to be set up a little bit different. I believe that this is going to have a levels of detail LOD node that's associated with it, and you can see if we go into this folder structure that we've got here for this, we've got the skeleton, we do have the LOD groups. It's only going to have this top LOD shown for this. It's supposed to work based off of your camera distance, so if you hold down Alt, left mouse, middle mouse, and drag, or you can do the scroll wheel, you can see that this is on. What I did notice about this LOD group is that it's only working for the LOD 0 and LOD 3. So it is possible that you could unparent these and take a look at each one of these LOD levels of detail. I don't think you're probably going to be too worried about it at this point. You would have at least access to, if we zoom out far enough, we could duplicate this. You can hit Control D and then Shift P will unparent that, and you've got this duplicate version of that. So if you wanted to take a look at that, I'll do the scroll wheel. Now, the orientation of Maya is different than Unreal. So Maya is a Y up, and Unreal is a Z up. So that's why this thing, when we unparented, kind of flipped like this. This is getting a little bit complicated maybe at the very beginning, but skeletal meshes, whenever you bind them to skeletons, they get locked. Their transforms get locked because you have the possibility that if you move the mesh and the skeleton, you get double transforms on things. So that's why they lock those. But if we wanted to rotate this into position, we could click on this, hold down Shift, and you can see all these are kind of grayed out like this. And we can right click and we can say unlock selected. And then at that point, if we tap E for, we've got Q, W, E, and R, just like what we had in Unreal for rotation and everything. We can rotate this up 190 degrees like this. And if we're in the channel box, like what you see right here, you can type a numeric value. So I could type in -90, and if I wanted to move this off to the side so I can just see this, this is the difference between this mesh data and this mesh data that you see here. Okay, so hopefully you're familiar with the camera controls in Maya. If you hold down Alt, left mouse click, you can rotate around, and if you Alt, left mouse, middle mouse at the same time, you can zoom in, or you can use the scroll wheel. And if you Alt right click, you can zoom in that way as well. And if you Alt middle mouse, you can pan. So that's how you get the movement in here. And just like on Unreal, if you tap F, it will frame in on an object like this. So if we have this selected in the viewport, hold down shift, I select this one, I can see both of them. They do have controls in here, so where you can see wireframe on shaded like this. I do like to turn on smooth anti-aliasing for wireframes, and then this is also screen space ambient occlusion. That gives it a little bit nicer look like that, and I can turn off the wireframe on shaded like this. Okay, so that's how you get access to maybe the LOD. I'll just select it and get rid of it. So just in case you're wondering how you can get access to that lower res model, that's possible. Same thing for these other LODs. We could duplicate them, Control D, Shift P, and unparent them. You'd have to go through that same process, but you could check out all the different LODs, and maybe that's interesting to you, and maybe you want to see how they constructed their geometry. Some other note, whenever you export out from Unreal to Maya, it does take your models and it triangulates them. So whenever they authored this content, it wasn't in these this triangle format like you see here. It was authored in probably quads and triangles, so that is a little bit annoying if you want to kind of investigate it from a modeling standpoint. Now, if you want to kind of use this as you know, a mannequin inside of Maya and kind of do some different poses and things like that, you can select your joints and you can move your joints. Let's see, if I tap 4, we can take a look at this, and you want to be careful about which joints that you're actually selecting. And maybe this and through here will give you something that you could use for rotating the arm, things like that. I'm just going to get an undo for that. So it is possible to use this model and pose it and do some interesting things, maybe with concept and other things like that. So don't forget that you have that at your disposal to be able to do that. Now, if you just want to move the location of the model around, you want to get to the actual root joint. So it might be easier in the outliner. So you can, if you don't see that, you can go to Windows and you go to Outliner, and you can make sure that that's loaded for you. It's possible that you could actually dock this within the newer versions of Maya. So if you like it docked, you could keep that. If you want it taken out and have it floating, you can do that. So if we select the root, we can rotate the root. We can you know, tap W, and we can move this. If you hold down X, we can snap to the grid that we have here, and you can move it in different areas in grid space. And you could also scale the skeleton. So if you want to scale this up or down, you have the possibility of doing that. I guess the bigger point is, if you're not really used to this, you need to be doing the work to the skeleton and have that drive what you want to do with the mesh. If you select the mesh, it's going to be we're going to lock those transforms, because like I was saying, it is possible we can unlock that. We could scale the mesh down. I could show you that. It would be kind of weird. We can unlock these things, scale the mesh down, have it be smaller, and still have this big skeleton and be rotating and everything else like that. And it would control this smaller thing, but it's kind of an odd setup. So we'll just leave that alone. So I just wanted to get this in here just so you can see this as a scale reference, right? Okay. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is actually getting your grid set up and making sure that your grid settings match in a way that makes sense for you. So I'm going to show you how to build this grid setup like this. Okay. And I think before I do that, we've already looked at how to get the cube in. If we're working with FBXs and you want to import multiple times, I think I should probably talk to you about that a little bit too, because that could become kind of confusing. So let's just do this. Let's import, use the FBX. We're going to do the chamfered cube like this. Go ahead and say import. And again, this has got the collision geometry on it. I'm just going to select it and get rid of it. So we do have this chamfered cube, and if we take it and we go to move it, so I'm going to tap W and hold down X as I move up, so I can do grid snapping. Looks like if I move it up 50 units like this, this is going to give us a 1 meter cube, and it's going to sit on the grid like this. So if you hold down Shift while you move, you can drag out a clone of it. That's one way of doing it. You can select it and you can hit Control D. That's another way of doing it. So I can hold down X and I can snap this right here, and I've moved this up 150 units. If I tap the space bar over here and I look at the front view, tap space bar on this, I'll tap F so I can see everything, and I'll tap 4 to just look at the wireframe on here. So this is 1 meter, and then this is basically 2 meters for us, and 2 meters is a little bit higher than 6 foot. If you do the calculation for this character, he is right around 6 feet tall, okay? So that's how you can start to understand just something a little bit about scale. Let's tap the space bar and come back over here like this. So I'm going to get rid of their cubes, that top one at least. I did want to show you this. Let's move this off to the side over here. And if we try to import that cube again, if everything works the way I think it should, it will basically overwrite that cube, and you'll be kind of going, what's going on here? Why did that happen? So I'm going to take this and move this up here, move it off to the side, and if we wanted to keep importing in multiple copies of things, we would say File, Import, Option Box. It's actually in this include, add and update animation. Let's just say add like this. And it is kind of weird, but that one option will allow you to import multiple versions of that. I think what is happening there in that case, let me push this off to the side and just try to give an explanation of what's happening here. So if we import again, even though that there's not animation data on these cubes, it does think that this file content we can add and update. So it's trying to update maybe the position or something like that, right? And if we just say add, it's just going to add that to the scene and it'll put a new a number at the end of it. So the original one didn't have a number, and then let's see, this one was put a number 1 here and 2 or whatever. So that's still a little confusing for me because I don't deal with it super often, but I do know it is kind of confusing. So I just wanted to show that, and why that becomes important also is, let's say you wanted to set up a scene and you wanted to maybe put 2 mannequins in there and have them interacting with each other, and you wanted to get them to pose different and stuff like that. And if you spend all this time posing the first mannequin and you go to import your second one, you would probably be pretty upset that the work that you did got overwritten by that. So we could do, let's just test this out. We'll push this off to the side, we'll rotate this, and let's just say we have this mannequin here like this. We put his arm down, something like that. And you can also do this. You can do shading and you can do x-ray joints, and you can see the joints through the mesh, and that does definitely make things a little bit easier to kind of select and everything. So I can turn that back off. Let's see, not use default material, so I'll turn back off x-ray joints like this, and then let's say File, Import, Option Box, and then we will import in our Manny. And then let's do this, keep it on add, and then import, and we should be able to get another version in. So we'll have 2 mannequins within the scene that we can use to pose against each other and build some interesting stuff. So this is a good way of being able to, inside of Maya, being able to do mock-up of characters and interaction between characters and things like that. So again, I know I'm spending probably a little bit of time on this, and I know you're probably wondering like why. I do think you could use this as a concept tool, right? So if you go to the art store, you could find those little wooden mannequins that they have that, I don't know, maybe they're $10, $10, $15 or something like that. And so if you think about it, you have a very high level version of that inside of Maya now that you were able to get some from Unreal, right? So it's could actually be a very good tool for you, even if you're not an animator and you don't think you need that. Being able to mock up some realistic proportions and things like that for humans and interactions is actually a very powerful tool. So let's go ahead and leave that. The last thing I'm going to show you on this before we set up the grid, I know it's maybe a little bit weird this order, but I did want to show you how to get this work in, is this. We'll go ahead and say File, Import. We'll do the option box for this, Import, and let's do the third person map, this template that we set up for us, okay? And on this one, let's just go ahead and say import. It's going to keep this option, at least during this session, for the add. We'll go ahead and import that in. And now I'm going to zoom out. And here is some issues that you may run into. I think in the previous videos we talked about the origin of the world and how they set this map up, and that the corner of the map is actually at the 0, 0 mark, which is a little bit odd. But things look pretty funky inside of Maya right now. That has to do with their near clip planes and maybe the scale and everything else like that of the scene. I personally believe you as a user should not have to worry about this and shouldn't even be thinking about this. I've been using Maya long enough to know why it's doing what it's doing, and I don't even really care. It just looks horrible. Let's fix it though. Let's select our perspective camera that we're looking through, hit Control A to bring up your attribute editor, or we can go to Window, General Editors, Attribute Editor. That's up to you. Yours is probably not floating. It's probably docked over here. That's fine. You can rip these panels out and you can click and drag them, and I like to have it floating. That's just my preference. So I've got the perspective camera selected, and you can see there's near clip plane is set to 0.1. If you set that to 1, that ugliness will go away, and if you zoom out far enough, your world gets clipped out. So this is supposed to help with performance or whatever. I don't know, it doesn't really work for me, but anyways, all you can do is you can extend the distance of that clipping plane, and so I'll just add 2 more zeros just so I don't have to really worry about it too much, right? So if you do that setup, if you see that, that will fix those issues, and now we can zoom in and out. And even now, like if we zoom out pretty far like this whole near clip plane, if we set it to 10, we can get that. Now you might get some weird drawing issue if you get really close, but I haven't really noticed that. So again, something you probably shouldn't even really have to worry about, but maybe so, you know? Okay, I at least want to show that. The other thing is, now you remember us importing in that cube and it had the collision geometry on there, and if we imported the scene in, and if we told it to export collision on that, we would have every one of these meshes and every one of these meshes along with collision geometry, and then it could be pretty easy to go through and then find the name of something within through here. So you can go up here and you could do, if you did a star and then you did static like this, let's just do static mesh, and this is my problem when I type. This is why I'm not a programmer. If we get one character wrong, then it doesn't work. So I'll do static mesh actor like that, and I don't know if it's a matter of like this, if I need to do the underscore and be able to find that, and we may need to do asterisk under on the front side, back side. So that was able to find everything with the static mesh actor name on there. Now if you had collision geometry, you should be able to do everything with an asterisk, like you see X like this, and then find that now there isn't anything on there. You could select that way and delete it, but kind of a pain. The other thing is, if I select all this geometry, if I hit Control G, that will group things together, or you can go to Edit and then we can say Group like that, and that will put everything in a nice group, and we can call this like Scene Template. So it's up to you what you want to call it, and then at that point you could actually just take the layer group and you can translate and rotate it and do everything you want to do with it. What I could potentially do with this is, if we go, this is going to give us the this pivot point for this, and then we can go to modify center pivot, and that will give us the center of the world like that. And if we tap W for move, if we hold down X, we could snap to the grid, and I could try to snap this to the center of the world like that. So I might have to get in kind of close at that point. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Let's just say somewhere around there or whatever. So there's ways that we could be a bit more accurate with that and be more exact, but that's one way that we could take the entire like template of the world and kind of shift that or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, and then we will take a look at the next part of just getting a very simple grid setup like this. So let's get rid of this one here and have that as our mannequin. And for the next part, we'll just take a look at getting our grid set up. So let's go ahead and talk about grid setup inside of Maya. So if we take a look here, we can actually turn the grid on and off. We also have under display, you can turn the grid on and off there. And then if we go to display grid and then we go to the option box for this, we can get access to the information that you see here. So if you see this length and width is set to 200 units, I actually have it set in the viewport, the perspective view, to push out 200 units like this. So if we pull this down to 100 and hit apply, you can see that's going to shorten up for us. And basically, after we get this set up, each one of these blocks represents 1 meter. Okay, and we've got 10 increments inside of there. So I do like to have that set to 200 like this, grid lines every 100 units, and then subdivisions of 10. So that will give us these bigger blocks of 100 units, and that will equal out 1 meter. And then the subdivision of 10, it'll divide it 10 times. Now if you needed more accurate grid snapping, you can set this to 20. If you need even more than that, you can set it to 40. And you can keep going like that. If you wanted even more, you can go 80 like that, and you can get really, really fine grid snapping. So I think for most cases, 10 is probably going to work fairly well for you. So again, imagine you're making parts and pieces, and if they're bigger pieces of environments and you're Legoing them together and you're getting them to snap, and you've maybe got a straight together with a 90-degree bend or something like that, this 10 degrees or 10 increments per 100 should work pretty good for you. So it's possible that you can change the color of your axis, the grid lines and numbers, which is this larger one, and then your subdivision lines. These are the color choices that I like. This is up to you, whatever you want to choose. And I've got axis, thick line for axis turned on, grid line and subdivision lines. So if you have these options, you should be able to get what I have here. If you want to change your background color, you can tap Alt B and you can cycle through the different viewing modes in the viewport, so it may make it easier or harder to see depending. I usually like this gray, so I think that this works. This is gray with a gradient on there, and if you just want gray with no gradient, you can keep tapping Alt B like that. So it's up to you. What do you want to do with your grid and the spacing and everything else like that, but this gives pretty consistent results for me. This seems to work rather well, so if you want to steal that, by all means please do. I'll go ahead and hit apply and then close out of that. The other thing that I wanted to show you is how to set up a cube to figure out maybe what a 6 foot man. Okay, so this comes in pretty handy. If you just open up a web browser, you can go ahead and see that if you type in, I did feet to meters, and if I did 6 feet, that will give us 1.8288 meters. Okay, now if I did feet to centimeters like this, I'm going to do 6 feet, and that'll be 182, again, 0.88. So all we're doing is taking the decimal point and removing the decimal point. But even though that we're working and trying to get these like 1 meter cubes and everything inside of Maya, we're actually working in centimeters. So if you make a cube that's 182 centimeters in Maya, that will give you basically 6 feet. So let's take a look at that and see if that works. We'll go create polygon primitives, and I don't have interactive creation turned on, so if you do, turn that off. But I'm going to go to cube, option box, and then I'm going to make my width, height, and depth 182 by 182 by 182, and hit apply for that. And you can see it's going to give me this cube that should be about 6 feet. If it's selected, I can tap F and I can frame on it and rotate around. Now if I hold down X and then click and drag up, I can get it to be about where I need it to be, but that should be at 92, and that should sit directly on the floor for us like that. If I tap spacebar and I go to the front view, tap spacebar again, and if it's on 4, and if I take a look at this, you can see where we're at with that. So actually it should be 92 point, no, 91, sorry. If I was dividing 182, so there's my math skills for you. There we go. Okay, so we got this cube. Again, it's roughly about 6 feet tall, and you can see that their character is roughly about 6 feet tall. So that's just a way of us kind of checking checking things for that. Okay, let's go back here. Now let's go and make a cube for us, ourselves. Let's say create polygon primitives cube option box. We'll do, if you need to reset this, you can always go reset settings. I'm going to do 100 by 100 by 100 and then hit apply, and that will give us a 1 meter by 1 meter cube. So if I hold down X, again, if I snap that, this one is 100, so it should be easy to go up to 50. You can type in numeric values in the channel box here. If you don't see the channel box, you can hit this here and get to this. You can also get to these creation options at the very beginning whenever you create a cube, and if you wanted to change the divisions and things like that. So let's say divisions with 3 and then 3 and 3 like that, I could get something like that. Or if I did 4 and 4 and 4, not 44, like that, you can see we can get you know, divisions within here. Now if you wanted to have it follow our grid, we could do 10 by 10 by 10, and then we would get a cube that matches up with our grid settings and our grid snapping like that. Okay, so the other thing is if I pull this into Unreal right now, because I've raised this up, it should come over okay. I can call this, let's call this a 1 meter cube like this, and I'll double click on it, and I'm going to copy the name because I need that for exporting time. I'll just save that. So we've got that. The other thing I can show you is if we freeze the transformations on this. So right now it does have some transformations on there. We raise it up 50 units. We could do this, and this could be something that you get yourself in the habit of. Like if you want this to come in Unreal and you want the pivot point to be down here on the center origin of the world, modify freeze transformations, so that will get rid of the units that were on here. And then now if we go to modify reset transformations, it should put the pivot point at the center of the world at the 0, 0, 0 mark, like that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and export this out. Let's say File, Export Selection. We'll do the option box, and let's make sure we're set to the FBX type here, and we'll say Export Selection. Now you can navigate anywhere you want. I had this temp folder that I was using like this, and remember I stole the name for that. You can name it whatever you want, but I was just stealing the name, 1 meter cube, and I'll save that out, and I'm exporting this out. And then now we've got our models inside of Maya from Unreal. We're able to set up our grid. We're getting a scale relationship set up. And this next part, let's go into Unreal. Let's import these things in and make sure we can get the work into Unreal. Okay, here we are inside of Unreal. Got this loaded up. Let's take a look at now how we can import our work in. So I want to be clean about this, and what we're going to do is go to the content folder. We're going to make a new folder for ourselves and get used to this, being organized with your work and getting this stuff in. So under content, I'm just going to right click, and then we can say new folder. And let's just call this scale reference like this. And then double click and go into scale reference, right click and make a new folder. And let's just call this meshes like this. Okay. We can right click and make a new folder, and let's just call this materials like that. So let's double click and go into the meshes folder, and then right click and say import to game scale reference meshes. Go ahead and navigate to where the model sits, where you put it, and here's my 1 meter cube that I have. And I'm going to go ahead and hit open. Now there are some things with the FBX importer type. We'll probably get into this a little bit later, but if you had multiple pieces from Maya and you selected them and exported them as one FBX and you want them to come in as one model, you would need to do the combined meshes. So don't worry about that too much right now. When we also import, you have the ability to create new materials, or you can tell it do not create material. I'll leave it on create new material. Let's just do that. We'll take a look at that. But you may not want it to import materials. If you don't, that's where it exists. So I'm going to hit import all like this, and it's going to go clear. It's got some information about no smoothing groups. I could take a look at that real quick and just make sure, so I can explain to you the exporter options for that. So let's just say this: File, Export Selection, Option Box, FBX. And when we export selection, it should give us some options for this. And under geometry, I did want the smoothing groups, tangents, and binormals. So this should have been set. I usually set this, and I didn't even really think about it. So smoothing groups, tangents, and binormals, smooth mesh. Let's go ahead and export that. And once you export something from Maya, it is possible, like once it's in the program, you can actually just right click over it and then you can say re-import. So that's pretty nice. So that's a possibility. If you need to overwrite it with a new file, you can say re-import with new file. If you right click over here to like do the import like what we did before, it's going to think you're going to want to just import over the top of it. So you got a couple different options for that. So let's go ahead and do this, and I'll say, do you want to overwrite the existing? Yes to all, like that. And then now it should have the tangents and binormals and everything else like that. Now, I guess there is some options within there to say you specifically want the tangents and binormals from the other program and you don't want Unreal to calculate that. That's maybe getting a little bit advanced for this very beginner stage thing right now, but it is something to think about. So if you're not getting the same look between the two different programs for soft and hard edges, that's what's going on there for that. Okay, we've already looked at this before. We can double click on this and we can take a look at the static mesh viewer for this, and we can see like what's going on with everything. If we were to take a look at UV information, it's probably got some default UVs that happen from us importing this thing in from Maya. So I'll just turn that off right there. So I was going to go to this show area. Instead of lit, we could go to wireframe and we could take a look at that. And I just wanted to verify that we do have the right amount of divisions. And I was telling you that it does take quadded meshes and it triangulates it for you. So just be aware of that. I can go back to lit. And so we can put that within on there. Now automatic collision. Is it going to have collision on here? Yeah, it should have auto-generated some collision for us. So that could be pretty nice and know that that's on there for us. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now it did make that material for us. Remember when we imported it and it made that basic Lambert material that we have on here. And if I go ahead and close this out, and if I double click on the Lambert material, you can see that it pushed it over from like Maya, gave it a parameter value. So we could, if we wanted to change this, double click on this, maybe make it like 0.2, something like that to make it a little bit more gray. And the other thing that's kind of cool about this is if you go to the roughness value, you can right click and say promote to parameter, and it automatically fills in the name for us. And then a value of 0 is super shiny. Let's just put like 0.25, something like that. Actually, let's go 0.3, and we'll go ahead and hit save. So we've just changed our Lambert material. It's taking just a second to save. Okay, now that's saved. We can go ahead and close this down. Let's just right click over this and make sure we're going to save this as well and through here. And let me get rid of these cubes that I've already pre-placed, and we'll go ahead and show you this. So we're going to go ahead and drag one of these in, and you can see we can actually line this up with the grid structure that we've got here. And I'll push this back just like this. And remember, we're snapping to 10 grid unit increments like this. So then from here, we can actually hold down Alt and then click and drag out a copy. I'll drag out a copy here, holding down Alt and one more. And then I'll select this, holding down Control, select these. I'll hold down Alt and then click and drag it up. And then I'll push over like this, hold down Control, deselect that one, hold down Alt, and then click and drag up. I'm going to push over in this axis like this, and then I'll hold down Control, deselect that one, hold down Alt, click up, and then push over, and then now we've got this pyramid structure. So we can organize these things. I think what I should do is select these and move these over, or I could move the player start, but I think I'll just move this over one more space and through there like that. So again, we can organize these things by going over here into the outliner and then call this SM 1 meter cubes, like that, so we can try to be a little bit more organized with things. And then once we do that, if we hold down Alt and we click and drag out a brand new copy of this and just have it snap right here, if we hit Control G, that will group everything together, which makes it nice and easy for us to hold down Alt and then click out new copies of this, like this, and through here. And so that's pretty interesting. If you want to do this, you can right click within that group and you can go to groups and you can say unlock, and if you wanted to move the position of one of these like this, you could do that, and that's how you can get into the group. And then after that you can go back to groups and then lock the group, and it becomes just a regular group at that point. And then if we hold on Shift, we'll select these. I'll hold on Alt and I can click and drag out a copy of this like this. And it is possible that we could rotate these 180 degrees, so that's something that we could do. But I was going to show you, you could also right click over this and then go to transform, and then you could say mirror, and we're in the up axis, and in Unreal the up axis is Z, so we can say mirror Z like this. Now from a gameplay standpoint, if I wanted to have my character come and jump on these and then go in between here, I would need some additional space. So I'm going to move it up to here. I don't think there's going to be enough room for the character, but we'll just check that out. And what I want to show you is if we play in here, we can quickly test out gameplay elements. So this is nice and easy to jump up on like this, but can I jump into the middle of these? I don't think so. Let's go back over here a little bit, and I think it's gonna just hit my head on there and I won't have enough space. So this is what I think is really cool about the engine, is you can throw things in here, you can test them out. We're making maybe a proxy of something, and we can try it immediately with our gameplay and find out, does this work from a gameplay standpoint? And then I'll hit Alt P like this. Let's stop this. Okay, Alt P. So I accidentally, instead of right clicking, or not right click, just click on this and say selected viewport, I was actually simulating, so I accidentally hit Alt S. So that's what was going on here. So let's just play this again, and then let's test this out and make sure I can jump within that space now. Yep, and I can fit. Okay, cool. So we know that that works, and we were able to prototype that thing out pretty quickly. And now that would give us confidence that we could push that back into a program like Maya, and we could build out very detailed pieces for this, right? So maybe these are like these really cool sci-fi crates or something. So at a very quick and fast level, we've been able to lay this thing out and then get the spacing and find out exactly what we need from a gameplay standpoint. And again, if we want to export these things out, we've got the grouping like this. We can go File, and we can say Export Selected. And I called this third person map and underscore just tries for like triangles. And I'll just go ahead and replace that because I've already exported it out beforehand. And don't turn the collision on unless you want it, but I don't think you will want that. So then I can go into Maya, and then now I can just say File, Import. We already have it on the FBX import type. Let's go ahead and import that, and then import this in. And go ahead and say import, and you can see it's going to make quite a few different objects for us. We could just group this all together again like we did before. Tries like this, and I could tap F and I could frame in on this, and we could see this is the location of it actually in Unreal. So again, what we were able to do with those meshes is set them up, check them out from a gameplay standpoint, send them over to Maya, and then now if we had to go and build something that was really complex and have everything line up, we could actually just hide these objects and use them as the collision geometry inside of Unreal. So the collision would still work, but then you could visually make something more complex and interesting and then replace that within the world inside of Unreal. Now, you are kind of new to this, so you might be asking yourself, how would that work exactly? Again, the collision's already working on this. You do have the ability, and I'm not sure on the groups, but at least on this level, we could type in visibility like this. And if we go under, so you can see visibilities in rendering. So if we go to visibility, or if we go to rendering, let's see where we've got this in here. Sometimes I might just close this up. So we got rendering. You could turn off the visibility of it. If you need it to be hidden in game, you need to have this turned on like this as well. Because what you could do, and let's just go ahead and play this real quick, and I'll just show you with the visibility stuff, is even though it's not visible, it's still there as far as the collision, right? So at that point, you could have a high-res mesh that sits right in that exact location. And for the collision, for the high-res mesh one, you could just turn off the collision for it so it doesn't have it. But it's getting all that collision from the simple object. So you're getting the performance aspect, but then you would get the visible component of the high-res thing at the same time. So it's maybe a little bit of a workflow that you could implement even right now at this stage, to where you lay something out, you build something a little bit more complex, you still get the collision from the low-res geometry, but then you have the look of the high-res geometry.